Hello there. As the world quiets for the night, let's drift back, not just in miles, but in centuries, to the time when autumn's last breath turned the fields gold, and the people of the ancient world gathered to greet the dark. This is a story about thresholds, between seasons, between worlds, between the known and the imagined. It is a story of Samhain, the festival that became Halloween. And as we move slowly through its history, you might notice how every flicker of candlelight, every whisper of the wind outside, feels just a little older, as though the night itself remembers. Long before pumpkins, before candy, before the idea of Halloween as we know it, there was Samhain. The Celts lived across what is now Ireland, Scotland, and parts of Britain, and their year revolved around nature's rhythm. They did not see time as a straight line, but as a circle, a wheel turning endlessly through birth, life, death, and renewal. The wheel's final turning came at the end of harvest, when the sun sank earlier and the chill crept through the hills. The bright half of the year gave way to the dark. And on that night, the last day of October by our modern calendar, the Celts believed something extraordinary happened. The barrier between worlds, they said, grew thin. The spirits of those who had passed could walk among the living, and the living could for a short while glimpse what lay beyond. Imagine the fires of those ancient nights, great bonfires glowing on the hillsides, villages ringed in light and shadow, the smell of smoke mingling with the cool scent of harvested earth. Families gathered to thank the gods for their crops, to honor their ancestors, and to prepare for the long, uncertain winter. They believed the spirits who crossed that night were not all kind. Some were friendly, loved ones returning home to bless and guide. Others were mischievous or restless or simply lost. So people dressed in disguises, animal skins, masks of straw and paint, hoping the wandering spirits would mistake them for one of their own and pass them by. This was the first seed of what we now call a Halloween costume. Not to entertain, not to impress, but to survive the night between worlds unseen. Fire was sacred. They lit great communal bonfires to cleanse and protect. From these, each household carried home a single ember in a hollowed turnip or gourd, a tiny spark to relight their hearth and keep evil spirits away. Centuries later, this ember's glow would become the candle of the jack-o'-lantern. But that story was still far in the future. For the Celts, the night of Samhain was also a time of prophecy. As the barrier thinned, they believed glimpses of the future might slip through. Young people practiced divination, peeling apples to read initials in their curls, casting nuts into the fire to see whose love would burn steady, or walking backward into the moonlight to catch a vision of the one they would marry. It wasn't fear that defined Samhain, not really. It was reverence, for cycles, for endings, for the unseen. Darkness was not evil. It was simply the season when the world turned inward. Life, like the earth, needed to rest before it could bloom again. Then came the turning of history itself. In the early centuries of the first millennium, as Christianity spread across Europe, new traditions began to mingle with old. The church, seeing how deeply the people loved their autumn festival, chose not to erase it, but to reshape it. They created a new holy day, All Saints' Day or All Hallows' Day, to honor the saints and martyrs of the faith. It was placed on November 1st right where Sam Hine had always been. And the night before, October 31st, became All Hallows Eve. Over centuries of speech and song, the words would blur into one: Halloween. It was a bridge between faiths, an echo of the old ways surviving in the new. People still lit fires, still dressed in disguise, still told stories of the dead returning home. But now they prayed for souls as well as ancestors, for those who lingered in purgatory as well as those at peace. All Saints' Day honored the holy. All Souls' Day, which followed on November 2nd, remembered everyone else, every loved one gone. For 3 nights, the living and the dead shared time and memory together. Candles burned in windows, bells tolled in church towers, and in that soft, smoky light, ancient Samhain lived on, disguised but not forgotten. By the Middle Ages, the idea of souling began to spread across Britain and Ireland. On All Souls' Day, poor villagers or children would go from door to door, offering to say prayers for the households departed in exchange for food. The most common gift was a small round cake, spiced and marked with a cross, called a soul cake. A soul for a soul cake. Pray you, good mistress, a soul cake. These were the songs of the night. Soft voices in the cold air, steps on the cobblestone, hands extended for bread and remembrance. This was not yet trick-or-treating, not yet play or prank, but it was a ritual of exchange, a gentle bargain between the living and the dead. You give food and prayer, we give blessing and memory. Everyone keeps the spirit satisfied. As centuries passed, the lines blurred again. Children began to dress up as angels or devils or little ghosts as they went souling. Some sang songs, others performed short plays or jokes. In Scotland and Ireland, the tradition was called guising, from disguising. The costumes grew wilder, more theatrical. The prayers sometimes became rhymes or tricks. The treats were small coins, nuts, apples, bits of cake. The heart of it, though, remained the same: to walk under the autumn moon, to knock on a stranger's door, to keep alive a link between the worlds. Imagine one of those nights, a narrow village lane, the air cold enough to cloud your breath. Lanterns flicker in the windows, and smoke drifts upward from hearths where families sit together, telling stories of those who've gone before. Outside, a group of children, faces smudged with ash, wrapped in cloaks far too big for them, move from house to house. Their laughter carries faintly through the mist. One knocks on a door, and when it opens, they sing. Perhaps it is a song for the souls in purgatory. Perhaps it is simply for fun. But behind it, the old rhythm beats on, giving and receiving, remembrance and renewal. The door closes, the children move on, their footsteps fading into the fog. Somewhere far away, a church bell tolls once, twice, 3 times. The night is cold, but it feels alive. The act of going door to door on Halloween is much older than we often imagine. It's not a new invention or a candy company creation. It's the echo of centuries of exchange. In ancient times, it was between people and spirits. In medieval times, between the rich and the poor. Today, between neighbors and friends. Trick-or-treating, in its modern form, is a cheerful descendant of souling and guising, carrying in its laughter the faint memory of prayer. Every time a child knocks on a door and calls trick-or-treat, they are, in a way, continuing a dialogue that began around Celtic bonfires thousands of years ago. Let's pause for a moment. Close your eyes and picture how those seasons must have felt. The scent of wood smoke, the whisper of leaves curling at the edges, the steady heartbeat of drums or the crackle of flame, the feeling of something ending and something beginning again, an eternal balance of light and dark, warmth and chill, presence and memory. Our ancestors were storytellers because the night invited them to be. When fields lay bare and the cold pressed in, the mind turned inward, and stories filled the silence. Samhain was not just a festival of the dead. It was a festival of imagination, of what might walk beside us unseen. Those bonfires on the hills were more than light. They were boundaries. They marked where safety ended and mystery began. And maybe that's why Halloween still holds us. Because even in a modern world of electricity and screens, we still love that quiet shiver between knowing and not knowing. When you light a candle inside a pumpkin, you are holding a spark of something ancient. That glow is the same warmth that once guarded Celtic families through winter's first night. When you pull on a costume, you're echoing a disguise meant to fool the spirits of long ago. When you share sweets with a neighbor's child, you're part of a tradition born from sharing bread for prayers of peace. The world changes. Our needs and fears evolve. But the language of ritual endures. Shapes shift, but meaning lingers. There is something poetic about how Halloween bridges opposites. It is dark, but playful, spooky, but safe. A night of laughter built on ancient reverence. Children run through streets with flashlights and masks, not knowing they carry the shadows of countless generations behind them. The costumes may be plastic now, but the impulse to mask oneself when the unseen walks among us, that's thousands of years old. The fire is smaller now, a candle instead of a bonfire, but the symbolism is the same. Light in the darkness, hope in uncertainty, memory in the season of endings. Archaeologists studying Celtic sites have found remnants of bones and food offerings buried near ancient hearths. Historians interpret them as gifts for ancestors, meant not to frighten, but to honor. It's a reminder that the first Halloween was never about fear alone. It was about connection. The dead were not to be banished, but welcomed. They were still part of the household, still present in the stories told around the fire. And if a few mischievous spirits slipped in among them, well, that's why you wore your mask. To laugh, to hide, to belong. As the centuries turned, the meaning of the festival continued to bend and twist, adapting to every age it touched. In one century, it was a sacred rite. In another, a church feast. Later, a folk holiday filled with songs and bread. And eventually, a night of laughter and sugar and plastic pumpkins. But beneath every version lies the same core idea. This world and the next are not as far apart as we think. For one night, we remember. We light a flame for those we love, and let it burn against the growing dark. If you could step back in time to that first Samhain, you might not understand the language, but you'd recognize the feeling. The anticipation in the air, the hush when the fire catches and the crowd falls silent, the comfort of standing near others in the cold, and the knowledge, somewhere deep inside, that endings are only beginnings in disguise. You might look around and see the villagers placing food at the edge of the field. You might hear them whisper names of their ancestors into the wind. And you might realize that their prayers, though old and strange, sound not so different from our own wishes on Halloween night. That those we've lost are safe, that the coming winter will be kind, that the light will return. Even now, when the sun sets on October 31st, the air feels a little charged. We still sense the turning of the year, the invisible threshold between seasons. And though few of us think of Samhain or All Souls when we pass out candy, the spirit of remembrance lingers quietly behind the fun. Maybe that's why Halloween never truly grows old. It carries layers of meaning like the rings of a tree, each generation carving its own mark, but keeping the roots intact. So, when you see a carved pumpkin on a doorstep, or hear the laughter of children echoing down a dark street, you are witnessing not just a holiday, but a living timeline stretching back more than 2,000 years. From Celtic bonfires to church bells, from turnip lanterns to glowing pumpkins, from soul cakes to candy bars, it's all one long conversation between the past and the present. And so, as this story slows, imagine that ancient circle again, the wheel of the year turning once more. The fields are bare. The air is cold. You pull your cloak tight and watch the last sparks of the fire fade into the night. Somewhere beyond the hills, you hear laughter, and maybe, just maybe, something else. A whisper that says, you are part of this cycle too. The living and the dead, the light and the dark, the remembering and the letting go. That is the gift of Halloween. Not fear, but continuity. Not endings, but return. So rest now, as the ancestors once did after their harvest, and let the night wrap softly around you. For tomorrow the world will turn toward light again, and the story will begin anew. There is an old wisdom in the figure of the witch, not the one of fairy tales or midnight terror, but the older one, the village woman who knew the language of herbs and weather, who listened to the earth the way others listened to church bells. Before she became a silhouette against the moon, she was a healer, a midwife, a keeper of the small miracles of daily life. She gathered plants by moonlight, not for spells, but for medicine. She whispered words not to curse, but to comfort. Her power came not from darkness, but from understanding. Over centuries, her knowledge frightened those who sought control over mystery. The healer became the outcast. The wise woman became the witch. Her independence was mistaken for defiance, her skill for sorcery. In the firelight of suspicion, her image was reshaped. A woman not of healing, but of harm. But if you look closer, beneath the stories and the smoke, you can still see the truth flickering beneath the myth. The witch was never only about fear. She was the embodiment of transformation. The human instinct to reach for forces unseen and name them as one's own. Every potion, every ritual, every whispered charm was an attempt to find harmony between nature and need. And perhaps that's why, even now, her figure endures every October, a shadow at the edge of the fire, a symbol of both the misunderstood and the mysterious. The broom came later, a simple household tool turned into a symbol of flight. In medieval villages, brooms were personal, each one made by hand, fitted to the reach and rhythm of its owner. When women cleaned their thresholds, they swept not just dust, but energy, intention, misfortune. Sweeping was cleansing, literal and spiritual. Over time, stories grew of witches using these brooms to leap through the air. Part of this may have come from old fertility rites, when villagers, during planting season, would run and leap astride poles or broomsticks imitating the act of flying to bless the crops with height and growth. The broom became a symbol of motion between worlds, the bridge between domestic and divine. It was humble and familiar, yet capable of transcendence. When later artists drew witches soaring across the night sky, they were, without realizing it, honoring an ancient image of renewal. Flight was freedom. The broom was the chosen vessel because it was made by the hands of the people themselves. Even now, when you see one leaning by a doorway, there's something ritualistic in it. It marks the threshold. It stands between inside and outside, between safety and storm. Perhaps that's why it still feels a little magical. Not because it can carry someone through the clouds, but because it reminds us how even ordinary tools can hold the residue of myth. The pointed hat appeared much later, its origins tangled in art, religion, and ridicule. In medieval Europe, certain groups were forced to wear conical hats as a mark of difference. Later, artists used the same shape when drawing witches, a distortion of the outsider's identity into a symbol of fear. But the hat's true lineage stretches further back, to images of ancient priestesses, magicians, and sky watchers. A pointed hat mimicked the tower, the flame, the mountain, symbols of reaching upward. It was a shape of aspiration, a connection between earth and heavens. Witches were said to draw power from the stars. Their hat, therefore, became an arrow of intention pointing skyward. When you look at the image today, a witch beneath the brim, the hat's edge casting a crescent shadow across her face. You might see not a villain, but a keeper of ancient geometry, a reminder that knowledge often hides behind what we mock. The tall, black hat survives because it holds a paradox, elegant and eerie, humble yet regal. It turns the human figure into a silhouette that can pierce the dark. The cauldron, of course, predates all of this. Before it was the witch's vessel, it was everyone's. It fed families, warmed travelers, and symbolized the circle of life. Fire below, transformation within. In Celtic and Norse myth, the cauldron was sacred. Some legends spoke of cauldrons that never emptied, of those that restored the dead to life, of wells of wisdom that simmered beneath the world's surface. Each story linked the vessel to rebirth, to the endless turning of creation. When Christianity spread through Europe, the cauldron's symbolism shifted. What was once sacred became suspicious. What once promised renewal began to suggest blasphemy. And so, the cauldron was placed beside the witch, the healer turned heretic. But the shape remained, a circle of containment, a place where elements meet and change. When you see a witch stirring her brew beneath the moon, you're watching an echo of the oldest human ritual, mixing earth, water, air, and fire into something new. Alchemy was never about gold. It was about growth. Every pot of soup, every tea steeping in hot water is a small cauldron of transformation. The witch simply made it visible. Ghosts drifted into the picture from even deeper memory. They have haunted every culture, every age, because they are not just stories. They are metaphors for longing. A ghost is the persistence of love that refuses to vanish. It is the echo of unfinished words, the shape our minds give to the ache of absence. Ancient peoples didn't imagine ghosts to scare themselves, but to soothe the discomfort of loss. To know that a loved one might still linger, still watch, still care, that was a comfort, not a curse. Halloween kept this tenderness. When candles flicker behind windows or in pumpkins, they're not warnings, they're invitations. They say, if you are out there, find your way home. For one night, the living make space for memory. We share our world with what we cannot see, and in doing so, we feel less alone. Ghosts are not about fear of death. They are about our inability to forget the living. Each story told around a fire is a small resurrection. Each whisper in an empty house is the heart searching for familiarity in the unknown. Skeletons and skulls came from a different truth, one less tender, but equally human. They remind us of the body beneath the mask, the structure that holds us together while we live. In medieval Europe, art often depicted memento mori, symbols that urged reflection on mortality. A skull beside a candle, a skeleton beside a crown. They whispered, "Remember, you too will die." Not as a threat, but as guidance. If life is temporary, it becomes sacred. If all things end, then every moment matters. Skeletons at Halloween are not just macabre. They are the festival's philosophers. They dance because they know what most of us forget, that death, too, is part of the rhythm, that bones, stripped of fear, are simply the architecture of being. To see them grinning in the candlelight is to be reminded that joy and impermanence can coexist. Then come the spiders, their webs spun between fence posts, door frames, and eaves. They build their homes out of nothing but patience and geometry. It's no wonder they became symbols of mystery. Their presence in old houses suggested age, neglect, and secrets, but also artistry, an invisible labor revealed by dew. In folklore, spiders were the quiet watchers. They saw everything and said nothing. Their webs caught more than flies. They caught time. When people cleaned for All Hallows' Eve, they swept away the webs not from hatred, but reverence, to mark a fresh start before winter's descent. Later, as Halloween shifted toward the eerie and the haunted, the spider's web returned as decoration, a delicate reminder of what endures after life has moved on. They are builders in the dark, creators of beauty that vanishes at dawn, the perfect companions for a night that celebrates impermanence. Scarecrows, though humble, carry their own strange dignity. They began as guardians of the harvest, silent sentinels watching over fields of grain. Made of straw and old clothes, they were human-shaped offerings, protecting crops from crows. But their presence was always uncanny, lifelike yet lifeless. Still, yet alert, they stood between man and nature, between growth and decay. In folklore, scarecrows sometimes came alive, walking at midnight, whispering warnings, carrying messages from the spirits of the land. They were not villains, but intermediaries, reminders that everything we create in our image eventually begins to look back at us. By the time Halloween adopted them, scarecrows had already crossed into myth. They became symbols of liminal space, guardians of the harvest turned guardians of the threshold. A straw heart standing watch as the world tilts into winter. The full moon, though not always present on Halloween, has become one of its most enduring emblems. It lights every imagined scene, turning ordinary fields silver, making shadows feel alive. Astronomically, a full moon on October 31st is rare, about once every 18 or 19 years. But symbolically, the moon has always belonged to this season. Its waxing and waning mirrors the rhythms of life and death. In ancient calendars, its cycles guided planting, harvesting, and ritual. The moon governs the tides of water, and perhaps, some say, the tides of the mind. When storytellers placed witches and ghosts beneath its glow, they were tapping into something older than fear, the awareness that the moon sees everything we hide. It has watched every generation repeat the same dance: light the fire, tell the tale, honor the unseen. The full moon's brightness is the mirror of the sun's dying strength, a nocturnal echo of summer's light. It gives Halloween its silvery hush, a reminder that even darkness can shimmer. And then there are the games, those small acts of divination that once filled the hours between bonfires and dawn. Long before fortune-tellers shuffled cards or read palms, people sought omens in the simplest things: the curl of an apple peel, the shape of candle wax in water, the way two nuts burned side by side in a fire. At Halloween gatherings in old villages, young people played these games to glimpse love or fate. They would toss apple peels over their shoulders, believing the peel would fall in the shape of a future lover's initial. They would watch candles flicker and whisper questions into the smoke. If two chestnuts placed near the fire popped apart, a couple would soon part ways. If they burned quietly together, their love would endure. It was not sorcery, only symbolism. The harvest was over, the fields were bare, and people longed to know what the next cycle would bring: a marriage, a death, a good crop, a new child. Halloween was the year's threshold. What better time to ask the future to reveal itself? Even now, echoes of these rituals survive in small gestures: a wish made before blowing out a candle, a coin tossed into water, a hope whispered into the dark. We still want to know what comes next, and we still find comfort in pretending that the night might tell us. Taken together, all these symbols, witch and broom, hat and cauldron, ghost and skeleton, spider and scarecrow, moon and apple peel, form a tapestry of meaning that stretches across centuries. Each began as something practical or natural: a tool, a creature, a celestial event, a harvest game. But over time, they became vessels for the human imagination. They endure because they speak to the oldest parts of us: our fascination with transformation, our reverence for cycles, our need to create beauty out of the unknown. Halloween is not a single story, but a collection of these small ones, woven together by the turning of the year. And when the season returns, we bring them all back into the light again. Somewhere, in a window or on a porch, a candle flickers behind a carved vase. In the fields, a scarecrow leans into the wind. An owl cries in the distance. A spider rebuilds its web after the rain. The moon slides out from behind a cloud, and someone, somewhere, picks up an apple, wondering, just as their ancestors once did, what the future might hold. The night is old, but the stories are still alive. And if you listen long enough, you can almost hear them breathing, whispering softly from the edges of the dark, reminding you that even mystery can be gentle. Autumn had already deepened when the first apples began to fall. Their skins, polished by rain, shone red and gold beneath the fading sun. To the people who once gathered them, apples were more than fruit. They were symbols of promise, of harvest, of love, of the quiet hope that sweetness might survive the coming cold. In the old days, apples carried both mystery and meaning. They appeared in ancient Celtic and Roman traditions, in harvest festivals where people thanked the gods for abundance. the Romans had a goddess named Pomona, guardian of orchards and fruit trees. Her symbol was the apple. When her festival merged with the Celtic Samhain, the apple became part of the season's rituals. As centuries passed, apples began to take on a playful magic. They appeared in games of chance, in soft candlelight and laughter, as people searched for signs of the future inside their reflection. One of the simplest games was also the most enduring. A basin was filled with water, and apples were poured into it until they floated, glistening like small planets. Players knelt beside it, hands behind their backs, and tried to catch an apple with their teeth. The moment of triumph, the splash, the laughter, the dripping face, was a kind of ritual in itself. It was called bobbing for apples, and for centuries it was a centerpiece of harvest gatherings and later of Halloween parties. But behind the laughter was an older idea: divination. In some traditions, the first person to bite an apple would be the next to marry. In others, lovers would share a bite, sealing a kind of playful promise. The game was a reflection of human nature, our need to turn uncertainty into joy, to transform mystery into celebration. Their apple's sweetness carried memory, too. When people bit into its crisp flesh, they tasted the end of the growing year. The sunlight gathered drop by drop through summer. Even now, when you see a bowl of apples at a Halloween party, you are seeing the ghost of Pomona's orchard, a tradition so old it no longer remembers where it began. As the centuries rolled forward, the festival's harvest games began to meet the machinery of modern life. Candy makers, always listening to the rhythm of the seasons, found ways to capture the taste of autumn in small, colorful pieces. One of these inventions came in the late 1800s, a confection of sugar, corn syrup, fondant, and wax. It was shaped like a kernel of corn, layered in yellow, orange, and white. They called it chicken feed at first, a light-hearted nod to the farm life that still defined the American countryside. It wasn't until decades later that the name candy corn stuck. The candy was simple, but its symbolism was perfect. Corn was the root of harvest. Sweetness was the promise of survival. Together they became a small token of plenty, a sugar-coated echo of older rituals of gratitude. In a way, candy corn is the modern descendant of the apple, a bright, bite-sized offering to the season itself. Its colors mirror the landscape of October, the yellow of hayfields, the orange of pumpkins, the white of the fading sun. It is autumn, crystallized. Though often debated, loved by some, dismissed by others, its persistence says something about memory. Like every Halloween symbol, it carries within it the story of continuity, how sweetness endures through time, even as traditions change their shape. Around the same era, another kind of treat appeared. Caramel apples, their glossy shells shining under lamplight, became a staple of fairs and fall festivals. To make one was to practice a kind of alchemy: heat, sugar, and patience, transforming the simplest fruit into gold. Makers dipped apples into molten caramel or melted toffee, then set them on wax paper to cool. Some rolled them in crushed nuts, others drizzled chocolate or sugar crystals. When they hardened, the apples gleamed like captured sunsets. They were the perfect gift for a season caught between abundance and restraint. Sweet, but made from the last fruit of the year. To hold one was to hold the transition between earth and winter. The last taste of orchard warmth before the frost. Children at autumn fairs would line up for them, the caramel sticking to their fingers and smiles. Parents carried them home wrapped in waxed paper, to be eaten slowly by the fire. Even now, their scent, butter, sugar, apple, feels like a doorway back to simpler times, to hay rides and laughter and the rustle of dry leaves underfoot. The caramel apple became a gentle ritual of its own, an edible lantern of harvest's glow. It was in the early 20th century that Halloween began to find its modern voice. Communities in America were growing. Cities replaced small villages, and the rituals that once happened around bonfires and in barns moved to front porches and streets. Children still dressed in disguise, as their ancestors had done for centuries. But now they did so for fun rather than protection. They called it trick-or-treating, a phrase that first appeared in print around the 1920s and 1930s. The idea was simple. Children went door to door in costume, offering small performances, songs, or rhymes in exchange for treats. The trick was a playful threat, a hint of mischief if no treat was given. But it was all in good humor. Communities soon realized that it was easier and more joyful to offer candy than to risk a prank. The practice spread rapidly, especially after World War II, when sugar rationing ended and suburban neighborhoods flourished. Porches glowed with lanterns, and parents watched from sidewalks as their children ran laughing from house to house. Halloween had transformed once again, from a night of spirits to a night of neighbors, from a festival of the dead to a celebration of community. The words trick or treat became a shared language, a password that unlocked doors and smiles. It turned darkness into play, and strangers into friends, if only for one sweet, fleeting evening. The porch light became its own kind of symbol. A small beacon glowing in the October dark, it told passers-by that the house was part of the story, that the people inside were ready to greet the night with kindness. A lit porch meant welcome. It meant laughter waiting just beyond the door. It turned the neighborhood into a constellation of safe lights, a temporary galaxy born out of community trust. For many, that light still carries quiet significance. To switch it on is to say, we are part of this tradition too. It's a simple act, but a profound one. Each light joins another, and the darkness becomes less lonely. In recent years, that circle of inclusion has grown even wider. The Teal Pumpkin Project began as a small movement, a way to make Halloween safe for children with food allergies. Families who placed a teal-colored pumpkin on their porch signaled that they offered non-food treats, stickers, small toys, glow bracelets, and tokens of fun. The idea spread quickly, carried by compassion and the simple belief that no one should be left out of the magic. Now, in many towns, teal pumpkins glow beside orange ones, two colors sharing the same light. The teal pumpkin reminds us that Halloween is more than costumes and candy. It's about belonging, about shaping joy so it can fit everyone's hands. It's about taking something ancient and keeping it kind. And what of the costumes themselves? They have traveled a long road, from animal skins worn to confuse spirits, to paper masks at village festivals, to the endless variety that fills shop aisles today. Costumes have always been mirrors of their time. In one century, they echoed superstition. In another, theater and masquerade. In ours, imagination and humor. To dress up is to become something else, but also to reveal something hidden. A shy child becomes a hero, a quiet adult becomes a clown or a ghost or a memory from childhood. For one night, identity becomes fluid, as playful as it once was mystical. Each costume tells a story of what fascinates us, what scares us, and what we wish we could be. From witches and vampires to superheroes and robots, the impulse is the same: to step outside oneself and see the world anew. Costuming, at its heart, is an act of empathy. We imagine what it feels like to walk in another's shape, to see through another's eyes. That may be the oldest magic of all. As Halloween spread through towns and suburbs, its sounds changed too. Where once there had been the low hum of chant or prayer, there was now laughter, the rustle of candy wrappers, and the rhythmic knock of small hands on wooden doors. Children in ghost sheets, witch hats, and painted faces moved under the glow of streetlights. Their voices rose in a chorus of delight. Trick or treat. Bags filled with sweets, and every doorway became a moment of generosity. It was still, in its own way, a sacred night. Not to gods or spirits, but to kindness, to the simple act of giving joy to a stranger. And even though most people didn't think of Sam Hain anymore, they were still honoring its essence, the cycle of community, the shared celebration of the turning year. As the century turned, Halloween continued to evolve. Movies and media added layers of imagination, monsters, heroes, legends, old and new. But underneath it all, the small rituals remained the same. The candle in the pumpkin, the laughter on the street, the comfort of being part of something larger than yourself. At its best, Halloween is a rehearsal for empathy. We face what frightens us, we disguise ourselves to play, we open our doors to the unknown. It is an evening of transformation, not through sorcery, but through community. The candy given at those doors may be modern, but its meaning is ancient. Once it was soul cakes, then apples, then toffee, then chocolate. Each new generation adds a new layer to the tradition. But the gesture is timeless, an exchange between giver and receiver, a small sweetness to bless the darkness. Candy, in this light, becomes symbolic. It is not just sugar, it is warmth made tangible, a tiny piece of celebration that can be carried home and shared. For the giver, it is participation. For the child, it is recognition. And between them, something unspoken passes. A moment of human connection wrapped in colored paper. The night ends, as it always has, with streets growing quiet and porch lights flickering out one by one. Candy buckets grow heavy. Costumes wilt and fray. The laughter fades into the distance, replaced by the hush of leaves skittering along the pavement. But if you listen closely, you can still hear the echo of older voices beneath the new. The rustle of robes, the whisper of prayer, the murmur of those who came before. The line from the bonfires of Samhain to the doorsteps of suburbia is long, but unbroken. Each flame passed its light to the next. Each generation found its own way to honor the dark without letting it swallow the light. Halloween has never been about fear alone. It has always been about what we do with it, how we turn it into laughter, how we share it, how we carry the glow forward into the next year. So, as you picture those glowing pumpkins and candy trails, remember what they truly are. Modern sparks of an ancient story. They are the same lights that once guided spirits home, the same gifts that once carried prayers for the dead, the same warmth shared around fires when the fields were bare. Every Halloween night, when a child stands at a door and smiles up at a stranger waiting with a bowl of sweets, the circle closes again. The old and the new meet in that exchange. Fear and joy, darkness and kindness, memory and invention. And for one brief evening, the world feels both bigger and smaller, filled with the laughter of the living and the soft, remembered glow of everything that came before. They carried it with them across the sea. Not the fire itself, but the memory of it. The glow of a candle in a hollowed turnip. The warmth of home in the cold of late October. When the ships left Ireland and Scotland in the 1800s, the passengers brought stories, songs, and customs folded carefully inside their hearts. Among them was Samhain, the old festival of the harvest's end, the night when spirits crossed between worlds. They brought it to the New World, to small towns and quiet farms, where the land was wide and the nights darker than they had ever known. Here, in this new place, the old customs began to change. The land offered different fruits, different weather, and different soil. In the fields of America, they found a plant they had never seen at home, the pumpkin. It was larger, softer, and easier to carve than the turnips and beets they once used. It was as though the new world had been waiting, offering a new vessel for an old flame. The pumpkin took to Halloween like a lantern to the night. It glowed brighter, lasted longer, and smelled faintly sweet when the candle warmed its flesh. Children marveled at it. Farmers displayed it proudly, round and golden in the autumn light. And so, the pumpkin became the keeper of the fire, a living symbol of the festival's rebirth across an ocean. What had once been a small charm to guide wandering spirits home began to grow into something more. By the mid-1800s, people in the United States were carving faces into pumpkins for harvest festivals, county fairs, and Halloween gatherings. The practice was still young, half memory, half invention. They called them jack-o'-lanterns, just as their ancestors had called the turnip lights before. But now the name belonged to something warmer, rounder, and distinctly American. The story of the jack-o'-lantern, though, is far older than the pumpkin itself. Its name belongs to a man, or perhaps a myth, called Stingy Jack. In Irish folklore, Jack was clever and troublesome, a man who loved to drink and loved even more to trick those around him. One night, the devil came to claim his soul. But Jack, sly as ever, convinced the devil to have one last drink with him. When the time came to pay, Jack persuaded the devil to turn himself into a coin to cover the bill. The devil, amused, agreed. But instead of paying, Jack slipped the coin into his pocket, next to a small silver cross. The cross trapped the devil, and Jack refused to let him go until he promised not to claim his soul for 10 years. When the 10 years had passed, the devil returned. Jack, faced with his fate, asked for one final favor, a single apple to eat before the end. As the devil climbed a tree to fetch it, Jack carved a cross into the bark below, trapping him once again. This time, Jack made the devil promise never to take his soul at all. The devil agreed, furious, and Jack released him. Years later, Jack died. But heaven refused him entry for his misdeeds, and hell could not take him because of the bargain. So the devil gave him a single ember from the fires of hell to light his way through the dark. Jack placed it inside a hollowed turnip and began his endless wandering, caught between worlds. They called him Jack of the Lantern, and later, Jack O'Lantern. There's something timeless in that story. The idea of a light carried through darkness, small but unyielding. When the Irish told it by firelight, they weren't just spinning a ghost tale. They were speaking of the restless soul, the one who belongs to neither heaven nor earth, the one who walks forever but keeps the flame alive. Perhaps that is why the image endures. Each jack-o'-lantern, whether carved from turnip or pumpkin, carries a trace of Jack's eternal glow, a reminder that the boundaries between worlds are fragile things. The faces we carve are both warning and welcome, masks of protection and portals of memory. Pumpkins, though born in the New World, seemed destined for this old ritual. Native peoples of North America had long cultivated them for food, valuing their seeds, flesh, and durable shells. They were among the first plants domesticated on this continent, part of a trio, corn, beans, and squash, that sustained entire civilizations. By the time Irish immigrants discovered them, pumpkins were already woven into the continent's story. To carve one was to join a lineage far older than anyone realized. The pumpkin's roundness suggested completeness, its color, the fire of the harvest sun, its hollow, the perfect cradle for light. Over time, the pumpkin became more than a lantern. It became a symbol of autumn itself, of harvest and home, of sweetness and nostalgia, of endings softened by warmth. It's in pies and porches, in soups and window displays. But on Halloween, it returns to its first role, a guardian at the threshold between worlds. Its grin might be cheerful or grim, its eyes crooked or kind. But every carved face is a version of the same idea. The human wish to shape fear into something familiar, to make beauty out of what we cannot control. The glow of a jack-o'-lantern at night feels alive, doesn't it? The flicker of the flame seems to breathe, as though something inside the pumpkin might actually be watching. That's the old magic at work. Not supernatural, but psychological, ancient, instinctive. Firelight dances. Our eyes see movement where there is none. Our minds fill the darkness with stories. In that quiet moment between seeing and imagining, Halloween is reborn, not as superstition, but as a reminder of how our brains weave wonder from the unknown. The pumpkin's rise coincided with the slow fading of fear in the holiday. By the late 1800s, Halloween in America had shifted from solemnity to celebration. The night became a harvest festival, a time for games and community gatherings. Children carved pumpkins and bobbed for apples. Neighbors decorated porches with straw and gourds. The dangerous edges of the old world softened into play. The jack-o'-lantern became friendly, even silly. Its grin widened, its eyes twinkled. Where once it had guarded the threshold against spirits, it now welcomed visitors, neighbors, friends, and trick-or-treaters. But beneath the fun, something quiet persisted. That ember of the old stories still glowed. A small awareness that Halloween was once about connection, between living and dead, between memory and imagination. Every time a candle is lit inside a pumpkin, the circle completes again. A light for the living, a beacon for the lost, a moment of warmth in the season of dark. The colors of Halloween, black and orange, emerged naturally from this balance. Orange is the hue of fire, of harvest, of the fading sun. It carries warmth into the cold, a reminder that even as the world sleeps, the spark of life remains. black is the color of night, of mystery, of the fertile soil that waits beneath the frost. It is not simply absence, but a canvas for all that glows against it. Together they create the palette of Halloween, contrast and complement, light and shadow, life and death in one frame. Later, purple joined them, the color of magic and transformation, of twilight where day and night meet. It carries the same energy as Samhain's threshold, a space where opposites coexist. You see these colors everywhere now, in lights, costumes, candies, and candles. But long before they were chosen by marketers or decorators, they were chosen by nature herself. The orange of falling leaves, the black of long nights, the purple of distant dusk. The palette of Halloween is simply the autumn landscape made symbolic. It reminds us that beauty can live in endings, that decay itself has color. And then there are the creatures, the silent witnesses of the season. Bats, owls, and cats, each one a shadow moving at the edge of the firelight. Each one carrying centuries of superstition on its wings or paws. Bats, for instance, are natural allies of the harvest. In the old bonfire festivals, insects swarmed toward the flame, and bats swooped in to feed. Their sudden, darting shapes in the night sky made them seem part of the ritual. Messengers or omens. Creatures who thrived in darkness when others feared it. When people saw them circling above the fire, they imagined spirits taking flight, souls ascending, or witches on the wing. It wasn't fear, exactly. More fascination, a respect for things that live where light does not reach. Owls, too, earned their place in Halloween's quiet pantheon. Their calls, haunting and hollow, pierced the silence of rural nights. In folklore, an owl's cry near the house foretold death or change. But to others, it meant wisdom, the ability to see what others could not. Eyes like moons, wings like whispers. Owls belong to the spaces between waking and dreaming, and so they perch naturally on Halloween's shoulder. And then there are cats, especially those cloaked in black. Their story winds back to ancient Egypt, where cats were sacred to Bastet, the goddess of protection. They guarded homes from vermin and misfortune, earning reverence rather than fear. But in medieval Europe, superstition turned. Cats, nocturnal and independent, were seen as companions to witches. Their eyes glowed in the dark. Their movements were silent and uncanny. To some, that was evidence of power. To others, of danger. And so the black cat became a symbol of both luck and warning. In truth, they were neither omen nor curse, just fellow travelers in the night. But the image stuck. Today, the black cat on a windowsill or a candy wrapper is a relic of that old misunderstanding, made gentle again through art and time. Each symbol, the fire, the pumpkin, the mask, the cat, is a piece of a larger language humanity has spoken for thousands of years. It is the language of transformation, of facing fear with creativity. We cannot control the dark, so we light it. We cannot stop the seasons, so we celebrate them. We cannot hold the dead, so we remember them in stories. That is the quiet truth beneath every jack-o'-lantern grin. We carve because we must make meaning. We light the flame because, deep down, we are still the people who gather around fire and tell stories while the wind moves through the trees. Halloween, in all its forms, is simply our oldest ritual of acknowledgement. That change comes, that endings matter, and that somewhere inside us burns the courage to smile at the dark. The next time you see a pumpkin glowing on a porch, pause for a moment. Look past its grin to the flame inside. That little light is ancient. It has traveled through generations and across oceans. It has been held in turnips and gourds, in memory and imagination. It has survived superstition, migration, and time. It is the same light carried by those who cross the Atlantic seeking new life. The same light that once flickered in Celtic villages under a harvest moon. The same light that guided stingy Jack through the endless dark. Every Halloween night it returns. A small fire against the vastness of the unknown. And for as long as that light burns, the story continues. In some places, the candles burn differently. Their light is not meant to frighten, but to guide. They are placed on tables, in windows, along paths lined with orange petals. A trail of brightness meant to help loved ones find their way home. This is Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, a festival born not from fear of spirits, but from love of them. It arrives not to haunt, but to welcome. A conversation between generations carried through scent, color, and flame. For 2 days at the turn of November, Mexico and many parts of Latin America bloom with remembrance. Families gather to honor those who came before, to celebrate their stories, their laughter, their favorite foods. It is not a time of silence, but of music. It is not a night of mourning, but of connection. On altars called ofrendas, photographs are placed beside sugar skulls, candles, and marigolds. The air fills with the aroma of pan de muerto, sweet bread baked in the shape of crossed bones, its sugar glistening like sunlight. People leave offerings of fruit, chocolate, tequila, and small trinkets the departed once loved. The marigold, cempasúchil, is said to carry the scent of sunlight. Its petals guide the souls of the dead back to the world of the living. In the wind, they move like tiny flames, reminding the living that memory itself is a kind of resurrection. When night falls, families gather in cemeteries, lighting candles and sharing food among the graves. They talk, laugh, tell stories. Children play between the headstones. The boundary between life and death softens, not erased, but acknowledged with tenderness. This is not Halloween, though the dates intertwine. It is its mirror image, a reflection of how different cultures have chosen to face the same mystery. Where Halloween dances with shadows, Dia de los Muertos dances with light. Both speak the same truth, that love does not end when breath does. In Mexico, the skull is not a warning. It smiles. It is bright, painted, decorated with flowers. It wears joy openly, a reminder that life's beauty and brevity are inseparable. To place a sugar skull on an altar is to say, "You are still part of us." The world remembers the dead in many ways. Some light candles, some tell ghost stories, some bake bread or write names in chalk. The forms differ, but the essence is the same: to hold what time has taken, and to let memory do what bodies no longer can. A few days later, in another part of the world, different fires blaze for a different reason. In towns and villages across the United Kingdom, the night of November 5th glows with orange sparks. Crowds gather around bonfires. Children carry lanterns. Fireworks crack open the dark like shooting stars. It is Guy Fawkes Night, also known as Bonfire Night, a commemoration born from politics, rebellion, and survival. In 1605, Guy Fawkes and a group of conspirators attempted to blow up the British Parliament, hoping to ignite a revolution. Their plan failed, and Fawkes was captured beneath Westminster. To mark the discovery, people lit bonfires in celebration of the king's safety. Year after year, the tradition continued, and the flames took on lives of their own. Effigies of Guy Fawkes, called Guys, were thrown into the fire as a symbolic act of purification. Over time, the night shed its political edge and became a festival of light and warmth. Children sang songs for pennies to buy fireworks. Families toasted bread over open flames. The sky glittered with color, and the smoke carried the scent of autumn and nostalgia. Though it is not part of Halloween, the two share a heartbeat: the fire, the gathering, the idea of illumination in the dark. Both trace their lineage to older rituals of harvest and safety, when fire was the line between cold and comfort, life and winter. When people stand around the flames on Guy Fawkes Night, they are not thinking of rebellion. They are remembering what fire has always meant: hope, protection, continuity. The bonfire is the ancestor of every jack-o'-lantern, every candle flickering on Halloween porches around the world. And, while flames rose in England, another kind of remembrance continued across the seas: the quiet endurance of Samhain. In rural Ireland and Scotland, even after the spread of Christianity and modern life, the echoes of the ancient festival never truly vanished. Fires were still lit in some places. Food was still left for wandering souls. Stories were told by hearthlight, and the air still carried that hush between seasons. In the countryside, people spoke of the IOC, the fairy folk, the spirits of the land. They were neither wholly good nor evil, but powerful, unpredictable, and deserving of respect. On Samhain, the veil between worlds thinned, and these beings might wander freely. To appease them, families left offerings of cream or bread outside their doors, and avoided traveling after dark. Children grew up hearing these tales, of strange lights in the bog, of music drifting from empty hillsides, of visitors who vanished by dawn. It was not fear that these stories taught, but humility, the understanding that the world is wider and deeper than what we see. Modern Halloween, with its lights and laughter, is built on those same foundations. The rituals have softened, but the reverence remains, that quiet awareness that we are guests in a mysterious world, and that sometimes, for one night a year, the curtain between seen and unseen grows thin enough to let the wind through. Within the Christian calendar, this cluster of autumn days forms what was once known as All-Hallowtide, a triad of remembrance: All Hallows Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. Together, they formed a spiritual arc, a progression from the holy to the human. All Hallows Eve honored the mystery of death. All Saints' Day celebrated the sanctified, those who lived in divine light. All Souls' Day was for everyone else, the countless lives unrecorded, the ordinary souls whose stories lived only in the hearts of their families. Church bells tolled through villages, candles burned in churchyards and windows. People baked soul cakes, small round breads flavored with nutmeg and cloves, each one offered with a prayer for a departed soul. The act of giving, a cake, a blessing, a moment, bound communities together through memory. Over centuries, all Hallowtide's rituals and those of Samhain merged and mingled, their lines blurring like candle smoke. Where one offered prayer, the other offered fire. Where one sought holiness, the other sought balance. Both, in their own ways, faced the dark with grace. Even now, in some parts of the world, churches hold services on November nights, candles glowing in rows for the lost. Each flame flickers with a name, and as the light moves, it looks almost like breathing. In the quiet, people sit and watch, not in sorrow, but in peace. The air smells of wax and earth, and outside, the leaves fall softly, carrying color into the soil. In Ireland, traditions persisted in smaller, homelier forms. Families baked barnbrack, a fruit-studded bread filled with charms, a ring, a coin, a button, a piece of cloth. Each slice carried a small prophecy. Find the ring, and marriage awaited. Find the coin, and prosperity. Find the cloth, and perhaps a year of patience or reflection. It was fortune-telling disguised as baking, a way to bring a whisper of destiny into the home. Children watched eagerly as the loaf was sliced, each bite carrying both sweetness and suspense. In that moment, the old customs of divination and play blended seamlessly. Faith and folklore stirred into the same batter. Across the sea in Scotland, the practice of guising continued. Children dressing in costumes, reciting poems or songs in exchange for treats. It was mischief wrapped in charm, a descendant of both Soling and Samhain. The masks were often handmade, painted sacks, paper faces, soot, and chalk. Behind each disguise was the same impulse as before, to blur identity, to become something else for a moment, to honor the spirits by joining their masquerade. Halloween was not a performance of fear, it was a dance of empathy. To wear another face was to understand another perspective, a lesson disguised as play. These traditions, carried by immigrants and travelers, spread slowly across oceans and generations. Each culture added its own notes to the melody. Where one used candles, another used fireworks. Where one baked bread, another carved pumpkins. The rhythm remained: light, offering, remembrance, renewal. The world turned, and the rituals evolved. But their heartbeat was always the same. A steady pulse beneath the laughter and color, whispering that to remember is to love, and to love is to keep the past alive in the present. In Japan, where Halloween arrived much later, the holiday transformed into something new again. There, the focus turned toward costume and parade, toward the joyful artistry of transformation. In cities like Shibuya, streets fill with elaborate attire, monsters, heroes, ghosts, and dreams all walking together under neon lights. There is no trick-or-treating in most neighborhoods, no jack-o'-lanterns on every porch. But the spirit, the playful defiance of fear, the delight in disguise, the communal joy of sharing the story, remains intact. What began as firelight in a Celtic field now glows in electric hues across skyscrapers. What once summoned spirits now summons creativity. The meaning shifts, but the emotion endures. Even in the heart of a modern city, Halloween still feels like a pause in time, a breath between the living day and the dreaming night. And in Canada, where the seasons mirror those of the northern United States, Halloween took root early and firmly. By the early 20th century, Canadian towns were already hosting costume parades and trick-or-treat nights. The holiday crossed the border naturally, carried by proximity and shared ancestry. In small prairie towns, children trudged through the first snows of the season, their costumes hidden beneath coats and scarves. Farmhouses glowed like lanterns in the dark. The air smelled of smoke and sugar, and the world felt infinite in its quiet. It was a reminder that Halloween's endurance lies in its adaptability. It belongs not to one country or belief, but to the human desire for connection, to gather when the light fades, to honor what has passed, to play, to give, to remember. Everywhere it travels, Halloween changes shape, but its soul remains the same. In Mexico, it wears flowers and smiles. In England, it burns with bonfires. In Ireland, it hides bread charms in fruit cake. In Japan, it glitters with neon and laughter. In Canada, it glows against the snow. It is one story told in many languages, the story of how people face the long night. We call it by different names: Samhain, All Hallowtide, Bonfire Night, Dia de los Muertos. But they are all variations on a theme, that life and death, light and dark, are not opposites, but companions. The candle and the shadow belong to the same hand. The bonfire and the fog are made of the same air. The festival and the morning are both songs to time. As autumn folds the year in half, the world pauses to remember itself, to look backward with gratitude and forward with grace. And in that pause, something beautiful happens. The living and the dead share a single heartbeat, echoing softly through every culture that dares to listen. So, when you see a candle flicker on a cold night, or hear laughter drifting from a parade, or smell bread baking in a warm kitchen, you are witnessing a lineage of remembrance. Each tradition, no matter how distant, is a verse in the same old song, the one that says, "We are temporary, but we are connected." The marigold's scent, the bonfire's crackle, the bread's sweetness, the pumpkin's glow, all are translations of that same idea, spoken across centuries, that love endures. And though each November brings the cold, we meet it with light. We build our fires. We tell our stories. We bake. We carve. We sing. We remember. Because that is what it means to be human, to look into the dark and see not the end, but the continuation of everything that came before, shimmering softly like a candle at the edge of sleep. They began, as so many things do, in simplicity, not as grand attractions, not as theaters of fear, but as community gatherings, small fundraisers, autumn fairs, places where neighbors met before winter sealed them inside. The first haunted houses were not built for terror. They were born out of curiosity, a desire to give shape to stories whispered on cold nights. Church groups and civic clubs hosted them, stringing together rooms with paper ghosts, cardboard coffins, and flickering candles. Children screamed and laughed in the same breath. The fear was never meant to wound. It was meant to awaken something playful, that trembling balance between danger and delight. Over time, these small rooms of wonder evolved. As the world changed, so did the appetite for fright. The stories grew darker, the lighting dimmer, the sound more precise. Fog rolled in, first from dry ice, later from machines. Actors emerged from corners, timing their footsteps to the beat of a distant soundtrack. What had once been a school fundraiser became an art form of atmosphere. Haunted houses began to mimic the texture of dreams, that strange mixture of beauty and unease that lingers in memory. Every hallway was a heartbeat, every door a threshold between worlds. The walls creaked and sighed as if the building itself were alive, whispering the same truth that old storytellers had always known. Fear, when shaped gently, becomes fascination. As the art grew, so did its language. Designers learned to paint with shadow, to sculpt with sound. They used fog and light the way musicians use rhythm. A single beam cutting through smoke could make a space infinite. A flash could make time stop. Fog machines replaced bonfires, filling gymnasiums, barns, and parking lots with manufactured mist. Under blacklight, the particles shimmered like ghosts of breath. You could see them swirling, alive and delicate, revealing how even air can be a storyteller. The fog was more than an effect. It was memory made visible. A link to the ancient smoke that once rose from Samhain fires, to the incense of All Souls' vigils, to the breath of the living meeting the chill of the unseen. Each puff from a fog machine was a quiet imitation of that connection, a scientific recreation of mystery. When the strobe light flashed, it turned motion into fragments, like memory itself. Sharp, incomplete, haunting. A dancer seemed to vanish mid-step. A curtain rippled as though touched by unseen hands. The line between the real and the imagined blurred again, not through magic, but through the physics of perception. What modern technology achieved was not new. It was the same game humans have played with light since the dawn of fire. The goal was never to deceive, only to invite wonder. Beyond the houses and halls, Halloween began to spill into the landscape. Fields that once grew corn for cattle and grain for bread found a new purpose as the season turned. When the harvest was done and the stalks stood tall and brittle, someone had the idea to carve paths through them, winding trails that formed living labyrinths. Thus was born the corn maze. By day, families wandered through the golden corridors, the sound of rustling leaves surrounding them like applause. By night, lanterns flickered between the rows, and laughter echoed across the fields. The maze is an ancient symbol, older even than the pumpkin or the mask. It represents journey, choice, and discovery. To walk a maze is to surrender to mystery, to lose yourself so that you may find yourself again. In the corn maze, Halloween returned to its pastoral roots, its feet once again in the soil. The haunted hayride grew from the same ground. Wagons once used for harvest became vessels of imagination. Bales of hay turned into benches, and farm paths into routes through stories. People climbed aboard and rolled through fog and moonlight, past scarecrows and lanterns, past fields where shapes seemed to move just beyond the corner of sight. Hay rides were simple things, but they held deep symbolism. They carried people through the liminal spaces, between village and forest, between warmth and cold, between the seen and the unseen. It was movement as ritual, a quiet echo of the processions that once circled Samhain fires. Each bounce of the wagon, each creak of its wheels, was a heartbeat of connection, between generations, between past and present, between the fear of the unknown and the comfort of community. Then there were the pumpkin patches, vast fields of orange scattered across the countryside. What was once a farm chore became a pilgrimage of joy. Families wandered between vines, searching for the perfect one, not too big, not too small, just right for carving or pie or the porch. The patch was a gentle paradox, a celebration of growth and decay all at once. Each pumpkin had ripened under summer's heat, and now it waited to be chosen, its stem drying, its flesh softening with age. It was both life and afterlife, the harvest in its final glowing form. People knelt to lift them, their hands brushing dirt from the skin, as if greeting an old friend. Children ran ahead, their laughter floating over the rows like migrating birds. Somewhere in the distance, the smell of cider and hay mingled with the crisp air. In these patches, Halloween found its heart again. It was not about fright or spectacle, but about touch, the weight of the pumpkin in your hands, the roughness of its rind, the faint scratch of its vine. It was the tangible proof of time's passage, the beauty of something reaching its fullness just before the frost. The pumpkin carving contest grew naturally from this ritual. What began as small family competitions, who could make the funniest face, the spookiest grin. The neatest cuts became community events that filled town squares with candlelight. Tables lined with pumpkins of every shape and size. The smell of raw gourd and smoke. The scrape of spoons against hollow walls. Laughter, chatter, a collective hush as the first lights flickered to life. Each carving was a small act of art, but also of continuity. The faces glowed not only with imagination, but with memory of those who carved before and those who would carve after. No two were ever the same, yet each one shared the same soft pulse of humanity, the wish to turn darkness into light. In the competition's quiet moments, when the candles were finally lit and the street grew still, the pumpkins transformed the ordinary night into something sacred. Their faces, hundreds of them, flickered in unison, a living gallery of the harvest's last breath. It was community made visible, hope written in firelight. No one needed to win. The act itself was the reward. To create is to join the long conversation of time. From there, the art of pumpkin carving blossomed. Tools improved, stencils appeared, and designs became intricate. Moons, cats, haunted houses, swirling patterns. Artists discovered that the pumpkin was more than a blank surface. It was a medium of texture and shadow, a sculptural challenge with the sweetness of nostalgia. Some carved seams into the rind itself, shaving away the skin until the light glowed softly through the flesh. Others carved all the way through, turning the pumpkin into lace. Some used multiple pumpkins stacked together, building totems of imagination that towered like gentle giants. Each new innovation was a reminder that art thrives wherever there is ritual. People do not carve because they must. They carve because it connects them to ancestors, to earth, to each other. In every flickering grin there is a whisper of the human spirit saying, "I am here. I am part of this." Even the pumpkin chunkin contests, born from the spirit of play and absurdity, hold a strange kind of poetry. Catapults and trebuchets built to launch pumpkins across open fields, a spectacle both silly and sublime. Behind the laughter, it is still a harvest ritual in disguise. The fruit has done its duty, the fields are bare, and so the final pumpkins are returned to the sky, as if flung back to the sun that ripened them. The sight of a pumpkin soaring through autumn air is strangely beautiful. A burst of orange against blue. A final salute to the season before the frost sets in. When it lands and shatters, it feeds the soil once more, its seeds scattering to begin again next year. Even in play, the cycle renews itself. At the center of all this, the houses, the mazes, the rides, the contests, is one small, persistent ritual, the act of carving the pumpkin. It begins quietly, a table covered with newspaper, a knife, a candle, a hollow sound as the top comes off. Inside, The air smells of earth and sugar. The seeds glisten like pearls. Your hands scoop and scrape, and for a moment you are connected to everyone who has ever done the same. To Irish villagers hollowing turnips by candlelight. To farmers cutting gourds under the harvest moon. To children laughing in kitchens across the world. When you carve the face, simple or elaborate, cheerful or grim, you are performing a small act of creation. The lines you draw turn a lifeless thing into a presence. The moment you place the candle inside, the transformation is complete. The pumpkin becomes a being, silent, glowing, a keeper of warmth against the night. It sits on the porch, watching the world go by. It greets the living and honors the dead. It bridges the ancient with the new. When its light flickers, you can almost imagine it breathing, not with lungs, but with memory. The flicker of those candles across neighborhoods, fields, and porches is the heartbeat of Halloween. Each flame mirrors the others, a constellation of small suns scattered across the earth. They are the descendants of the Samhain bonfires, the inheritors of the candles once burned for the souls of the departed. They are a reminder that even the smallest light can hold centuries of meaning. When the night deepens and the fog thickens over lawns and roads, you can see the lanterns glowing softly through it, their faces calm and unafraid. They are the guardians of October, the gentle watchers who mark the border between seasons. Every year they return, and every year they fade. They collapse, soften, melt, and their seeds return to the soil. It is an ending, but also a beginning. The light may die, but the story does not. Haunted houses fade, fog machines rest, mazes wither, hay rides end. But the essence of all these things remains, human imagination meeting the natural world. Every scare, every laugh, every candle is part of the same long ritual. The celebration of change, the acceptance of time, the joy of being briefly afraid in a safe, shared space. The true haunting of Halloween is not the ghost or the monster. It is memory itself, the persistence of tradition, the echo of the past inside the present. When you step into a haunted house, or walk through a corn maze under the moon, or carve a pumpkin by your doorstep, you are entering that echo. You are walking a path laid down by countless hands, lit by countless flames. And when you blow out the candle at the end of the night, the smoke that curls upward joins all the others before it, rising into the dark like a soft exhale of gratitude. For the harvest, for the light, for the chance to imagine again and again that the line between fear and wonder is thinner than we think. It began in silence. Before there was sound or color, before a scream could echo from the screen, there was the flicker of light on a white wall. A projector whirred. Shadows danced. Audiences leaned forward, watching dreams made visible. The first horror films were not meant to terrify. They were experiments in illusion, scientific curiosities that asked, what happens when light tells lies? But soon, those lies began to feel familiar. People saw monsters in the glow and recognized something of themselves. The early 20th century gave birth to the world's first cinematic ghosts and vampires. When Nosferatu crept onto the screen in 1922, its figure was elongated, awkward, almost insect-like, a shadow among shadows. Audiences gasped, and something deep in human storytelling shifted. The monster was no longer distant myth, it was close, tangible, reflected through the lens of technology. From there came the age of the universal monsters, a pantheon that defined the way we imagine Halloween itself. Dracula in 1931, his accent soft and his eyes bright with hunger. Frankenstein's monster, stitched together from the bodies of the dead, learning to fear himself in a world that feared him first. The Wolfman, tragic and doomed, caught between human and beast. The Mummy, wrapped not only in linen but in the loneliness of eternity. And the creature from the Black Lagoon, swimming through water that mirrored the unconscious mind. These figures became more than fiction. They became archetypes, manifestations of the fears we cannot name. Dracula taught us about desire and control. Frankenstein about creation and consequence. The Wolf Man about the beast within. The Mummy about time, and the creature about isolation. Together, they created a shared mythology for the modern age, a digital folklore projected through film. Every Halloween that followed carried their shadows, plastic fangs, bandages, green face paint, playful echoes of the monsters who taught us how to dream of fear. As cinema grew, so did our understanding of what it could do to the human mind. Light and sound became instruments of emotion. A single violin note could raise the pulse. A door creaking could tighten the chest. Filmmakers learned to choreograph tension the way composers wrote music. When Halloween was released in 1978, it did more than introduce a masked killer. It defined a new kind of storytelling. A minimalist dance between silence and sound. The film's opening sequence, a child's eyes behind a mask, showed how horror could emerge from the ordinary. No castles, no creatures, no storms, just a neighborhood, a house, a heartbeat. The slasher era that followed reflected modern fears, urban loneliness, anonymity, the sense that danger could live next door. But even these stories, dripping with tension and shadow, were descendants of the same ancient impulse. To face what frightens us, to name it, to survive it. The camera had become the new firelight. Audiences gathered around it as they once gathered around bonfires, watching flickering images instead of flames. The shadows it cast were psychological, but the effect was the same. A collective heartbeat in the dark. As October rolled closer each year, studios learned to time their releases. The weeks before Halloween became a harvest of fear. New tales arrived like falling leaves, ghost stories, creature features, haunted houses, and quiet psychological chills. It became a kind of ritual. The lights dimming, the popcorn scent rising, the collective inhale before the first scream. Horror films, more than any other genre, know the power of rhythm. The long pause before the jump, the heartbeat between footsteps, the silence that says something is coming. These patterns mimic life itself. Anticipation, climax, release. That's why fear feels almost musical. And perhaps that is why Halloween and cinema fit so perfectly together. Both are about transformation. Both are about the space between imagination and reality. Both ask us to walk willingly into the dark just to see what glows inside it. But fear, in these stories, is never just about monsters. It's about reflection. Every era remakes its creatures to fit its anxieties. When science advanced, we feared what we could create, thus Frankenstein's monster. When disease spread unseen, we feared infection, thus the vampire. When civilization grew mechanical, we feared losing our humanity, thus the werewolf. When death felt far away, we resurrected it in mummies, skeletons, and ghosts. In truth, the monsters changed less than we did. They mirrored us, showing how every generation remixes its nightmares into something familiar. Even now, when you see a child dressed as a vampire or a teenager wearing a plastic hockey mask, you are looking at an inheritance. Each costume carries within it a century of cinematic imagination, refined through light, shadow, and sound. Among all these stories, one stands apart, older than Hollywood, older even than electricity. A horse's gallop under a harvest moon, a bridge, a man without a head. The legend of Sleepy Hollow, written by Washington Irving in 1820, became America's first great ghost story. In it, Ichabod Crane, the anxious schoolteacher, rides home through the misty woods, haunted by tales of a headless rider. When the real horseman appears, or perhaps when Ichabod's fear conjures him, the line between reality and imagination dissolves. The headless horseman became one of the first distinctly American monsters, a creature born not from myth, but from atmosphere. He embodied the haunting of the New World, the way its forests and fog still whispered of the old. When he threw his flaming pumpkin head, he was throwing history itself, the reminder that every land carries its ghosts. Through adaptations in film and animation, the Horseman joined Dracula and Frankenstein in the growing pantheon of Halloween imagery. He galloped from literature into costume, from legend into folklore. And somewhere between the gallop and the silence that followed, America found its own way of telling ghost stories. Then came the vampires again, reimagined, reinvented, endlessly reborn. No longer confined to castles, they appeared in small towns, nightclubs, high schools, and cities. They adapted because fear adapted. The vampire is humanity's oldest metaphor for desire, the hunger for eternity, the fear of intimacy, the cost of survival. It is also, in its own way, a story of loneliness. To live forever is to watch everyone else fade. Every vampire tale, from Dracula to Interview with the Vampire, is a love story disguised as horror, a meditation on the human wish to outlast time. We wear capes now, not because we fear bloodsuckers, but because we recognize ourselves in them, our contradictions, our longing for both freedom and belonging. Their immortality is our imagination refusing to die. The werewolf runs beside them, fur shimmering in the silver light. The full moon's pull has always fascinated us, its steady rhythm, its invisible influence. In myths across the world, humans turn into beasts when the moon is high, as if nature itself demanded balance. Civilization by day, wildness by night. The werewolf is not a villain, but a metaphor for what happens when instinct breaks through reason. It is rage, passion, hunger, the parts of the self that cannot be tamed. That is why its story endures. We recognize that duality inside us, that tension between order and chaos. When Halloween images show the wolf silhouetted against a round moon, it is not merely a decoration. It is an acknowledgement of that inner rhythm, the animal heartbeat beneath the human skin. Zombies, too, shuffle through our collective imagination. Their origins lie not in Europe, but in the spiritual traditions of West Africa and the Caribbean, in the stories of the enslaved, in the blending of African belief and colonial horror. The original zombie was not a mindless corpse, but a soul robbed of freedom, a being caught between life and death. When the concept reached Western cinema, it was transformed into a mirror for modern anxiety. First about control, then about contagion, then about consumption. George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead, 1968, gave the zombie new meaning, not as an individual monster, but as a mass, a reflection of society's decay. In those blank eyes and dragging feet, we saw the fear of conformity, of apathy, of losing one's humanity to the collective. Since then, zombies have multiplied endlessly, fast, slow, viral, mechanical. But the core idea remains. What does it mean to be truly alive? Halloween keeps the question close, hiding it behind fake blood and playful costumes, because sometimes the deepest questions are easier to face when we're laughing. Through these evolving myths, vampires, werewolves, zombies, ghosts, Halloween became the great archive of our collective psyche. Each decade added a new chapter, each film a new facet of fear, each costume a new confession. What binds them is not terror, but curiosity. We do not tell horror stories because we love pain. We tell them because we love wonder. Fear is simply the sharp edge of awe. To feel afraid is to admit that the world is still larger than we are. The monsters remind us that we have not seen everything, that there are still corners of existence, in nature, in memory, in ourselves, that resist explanation. In their shadows, we glimpse the vastness of possibility. When October comes and the nights grow long, people still gather around these stories, some in theaters, some at home beneath blankets, some walking through haunted attractions built to mimic their favorite scenes. The medium changes. The meaning endures. It is ritual dressed as recreation. Horror has always been our way of practicing bravery. It lets us rehearse for real fear in a space where we are safe. The lights will come back on. The mask will come off. The monster will fade into pixels and sound. But in that moment of darkness, we remember what it feels like to be alive. The quickened pulse, the tightened breath, the awareness of heartbeats we usually ignore. That is the paradox of Halloween. We scare ourselves to find comfort. We face death to celebrate life. And when the credits roll or the porch light flickers back on, we smile, knowing the darkness has not won. It has merely reminded us how bright the light can be. Even now, every October, a new generation discovers these same stories. They watch Dracula's cape flutter in black and white shadow. They hear the violin tremble as the camera moves down a dark hallway. They see a full moon rising above a quiet town. And something ancient stirs in them, the same feeling that stirred in those who watched firelight dance on cave walls. For though technology has changed, our imagination has not. We are still the storytellers, still the watchers in the dark. The ghosts of the screen are just reflections of our own persistence, our refusal to stop wondering what lies beyond the edge of the known. So, when the next horror film flickers to life, and the theater falls silent, and someone screams, you can feel the echo of every festival, every fire, every October night that came before. It is the same story, told in new light, the story of humankind learning again and again that the shadows only grow darker because the light keeps shining. When autumn settles over towns and suburbs, the first place to feel it is the schoolyard. The air sharpens. Leaves gather along fences, and the halls begin to hum with quiet excitement. Each year, the tradition repeats itself. Paper pumpkins taped to classroom doors, construction paper bats hanging from ceilings, the scent of crayons and glue mingling with apple cider. For children, Halloween is not just a night. It is a season of anticipation. Costumes take shape from imagination and cardboard. Teachers prepare fall carnivals with ring tosses, cupcake tables, and haunted classrooms glowing in orange light. Some schools call them fall festivals, a gentler name, but the same heart. It's the time of year when learning gives way to laughter, when walls become play. Children line up for parades in the gymnasium. Masks crooked, capes too long, each one a small echo of older processions, the marches around fires, the songs sung for soul cakes. Even here, under fluorescent lights, the same instinct endures, to gather, to disguise, to celebrate the passage of the year. Outside, the scent of pumpkin spice begins to fill the air. It's in coffee shops, bakeries, candles, even soap. A blend of cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and ginger. It's less a flavor than a memory. The mixture carries a hidden history. Spices like these once traveled oceans, their paths tied to trade routes and risk, to merchants and explorers seeking warmth in faraway lands. To sprinkle them into pies and drinks was once an act of luxury, a promise of comfort in the cold. Now, they have become the scent of nostalgia, of scarves and sweaters, of kitchens glowing with oven light. Pumpkin spice, despite its ubiquity, isn't about the spice itself. It's about what it represents, a return to ritual, a collective sigh as the world slows down. When we sip it, we're tasting not just sweetness, but centuries of harvest tradition condensed into a cup. It's autumn made edible, memory made fragrant. As October deepens, costume makeup begins to appear on store shelves, palettes of face paint, tubes of fake blood, shimmering powders. Yet the evolution of these simple paints tells its own story. In the early days of theater, makeup was crude and heavy. Grease paint, made from animal fat and pigment, could irritate the skin, and its smell lingered long after the performance. As chemistry advanced, new, safer formulas emerged. Water-based paints that washed away with soap, colors that glowed under blacklight but remained kind to the skin. For children and parents, this small innovation changed everything. Halloween makeup became art rather than discomfort. A painted skeleton face, a shimmer of glitter for a fairy's cheek, a streak of green for a friendly witch. Each one a temporary transformation, a harmless illusion. These paints are gentle alchemy, a safe way to explore the self. Under their colors, a shy child can roar like a tiger. A quiet teen can sparkle like a star. For one evening, the boundaries between real and imagined blur harmlessly beneath a layer of water-soluble magic. Masks, too, have evolved. Once they were rigid, made from plastic, rubber, or papier-mâché. They trapped heat, muffled voices, and often carried the faint scent of latex and sweat. But as awareness grew, so did innovation. Non-latex and hypoallergenic materials became the new standard. Masks turned soft, breathable, designed not just for appearance but for comfort. The change was quiet, almost invisible, but it reflected a shift in how people saw the holiday itself, not as endurance, but as enjoyment. The best mask now is the one a child forgets they're wearing, one that lets them laugh, see clearly, and run without restraint. It's a small victory of design and empathy, proof that tradition adapts not by breaking, but by softening. When the sun sets and the streets come alive, another kind of safety takes the stage. Reflective tape glimmers on dark costumes. Parents tuck glow sticks into hoods and sleeves. Tiny lights blink from candy buckets. Each shimmer of reflection is a symbol of modern care. It's the world saying, "Go play, but come home safe." Long ago, firelight was the only glow that guided the night. Now, LEDs and reflectors do the same job, small guardians against the dark. To some, these details seem mundane. To others, they are a quiet miracle, proof that even in our smallest traditions, technology and tenderness can coexist. The lights twinkle like miniature stars scattered across the earth, each one attached to a heartbeat moving through the night. From above, the world might look like a shifting galaxy of children, their laughter echoing between streetlights, their safety shining back into the sky. Safety, of course, extends to the candy, too. Every parent knows the ritual, spreading the haul across the table, inspecting wrappers under warm kitchen light. It's not about suspicion alone. It's about love translated into vigilance. This simple act is a modern echo of the old souling prayers, a way of caring for the children who wander through the dark. To check the candy is to bless it, to make sure the sweetness carries no harm. And once the task is done, the first unwrapped piece feels sacred, a moment of permission, a sigh of relief, a small victory of trust restored. The pets, too, have joined the masquerade. Dogs in capes, cats with pumpkin collars, ferrets dressed as ghosts, birds as pirates. It's an endearing sight, but also a lesson in empathy. To dress a pet is to extend belonging beyond the human. It says, "You are part of this family, this joy, this night." Of course, not every animal enjoys the attention. Some squirm, some sulk. And so, costume makers learned again. Softer fabrics, lighter materials, quick-release fasteners. Comfort first, aesthetics second. Because a holiday that began with disguises to confuse spirits has slowly become one about inclusion. A celebration wide enough for everyone, even the four-legged. The Teal Pumpkin Project continues that same thread of care. Started by a single parent in Tennessee, it spread quickly through neighborhoods and news feeds. Families painted pumpkins teal to signal safety for children with allergies. A promise of non-food treats, small toys, glow bands, stickers. What began as one family's compassion grew into a global gesture of acceptance. It changed the way porches looked in October, a soft blue among the orange, a quiet revolution of kindness. The teal pumpkin is more than a symbol. It is a reminder that joy must be shared deliberately, that tradition only lives when it evolves to include. Every teal glow on a doorstep is an act of empathy made visible. It says, "There's room for you here too." Inside the homes, decorations begin to shift from frightening to beautiful. Paper garlands replace cobwebs. Candles glow inside mason jars. Windowsills fill with small pumpkins, each one uncarved, their skin unbroken, symbols of patience and peace. A new generation approaches Halloween not as a night of fear, but as a night of atmosphere. The thrill remains, but so does the calm. Orange and black lights trace the porch rails like fireflies. Soft music hums from Bluetooth speakers. Pumpkins smile instead of snarl. The holiday has matured without losing its heart. It is no longer a day to summon terror, but a time to embrace imagination. Where once people warded off spirits, they now invite wonder. Food remains central, as it has always been. Cider simmers on stovetops, steam curling upward like a whisper. The scent of cinnamon, apple, and clove fills the room. cookies shaped like bats and leaves cool on wire racks. Bowls of popcorn glow in television light as families gather for old movies. Some still roast pumpkin seeds, a tradition both ancient and practical. Each seed, brushed with salt and oil, crackles softly as it toasts, a sound that feels like comfort itself. Eating them is an act of gratitude to the fruit that lit the season. The flavors of autumn, sweet, spiced, smoky, warm, are more than culinary trends. They are sensory anchors to memory. They tell the body, the year is winding down, but you are safe. Meanwhile, in living rooms and community centers, crafting begins. Families make DIY decorations, paper bats, recycled ghosts, fabric pumpkins, the hum of scissors, the scratch of glue sticks, the laughter of improvisation. It is art as ritual, repetition that soothes, creation that connects. Each handmade piece carries the texture of its maker's care. A crooked smile on a ghost, a bat with uneven wings, flaws that make the object human and therefore beautiful. In a world of digital perfection, these imperfect crafts are grounding. They remind us that our hands still know how to make things, that joy can be tangible, and that shared creativity binds families tighter than screens ever could. Even the decor outside homes tells quiet stories. Some houses choose extravagance, animatronic skeletons, fog machines, giant spiders crawling across roofs. Others choose simplicity. A single candle in the window, a wreath of dried leaves on the door. No matter the scale, the intention is the same: to participate, to join the neighborhood's rhythm. Each house becomes a note in a shared song of anticipation. The street transforms into theater, its performers both audience and actor. For one night, imagination replaces reality. We build little worlds out of porch lights and cardboard, and somehow, for a few hours, the ordinary feels enchanted. Beneath all the pageantry, though, Halloween remains grounded in something deeply human: the desire to belong. Every costume, every bowl of candy, every candle placed in a pumpkin is a small act of reaching outward. The night asks nothing more than participation. You can join it quietly or loudly, with a carved lantern or a teal one, with laughter, prayer, or stillness. It doesn't matter how. The point is simply to share the moment. That is why the holiday survives every change. It can be secular or sacred, playful or solemn, crowded or solitary. It can belong to anyone, anywhere. Its form shifts like the fog, but its purpose remains: to make meaning out of endings, and warmth out of the dark. At the edge of the night, when the trick-or-treaters have gone home and the streets fall quiet, you can still feel the pulse of the evening in the air. The faint scent of smoke, the rustle of wrappers, the glow of a single pumpkin flickering on a porch. Inside, tired children drift to sleep, dreaming of ghosts that smile and witches that wave. Parents sit nearby, sorting candy, folding costumes, watching the candlelight fade slowly from orange to ember. And in that small silence, you can hear what Halloween has always been trying to say: that life, in all its mystery, is not meant to be faced alone. Every laugh, every handmade mask, every teal pumpkin, every light is a declaration of togetherness. The night is not about darkness conquering light, but about light choosing to dwell within the dark. The costumes will fade, the candy will be eaten, the decorations boxed away. But something remains: the feeling of connection that outlasts the ritual. It lingers like the scent of spice, like candle smoke that curls upward even after the flame is gone. That's what keeps Halloween alive. Not the tricks or the treats, but the gentle humanity woven through them. The way it teaches us, without sermon or lecture, that joy, too, can be sacred. And as autumn gives way to winter, as the days shorten and the air stills, we carry that lesson forward. That light can be playful, that fear can be kind, and that in a world full of change, the most magical thing of all is our ability to gather, to create, to care. The candles burn low now. The stories have quieted, and the night wraps itself around you like a soft blanket. If you've drifted here, half awake, half dreaming, know that this moment of stillness is yours to keep. Every time you pause to listen, to breathe, to wonder, you're keeping the old magic alive. If you'd like to wander with us again, through stars, oceans, forests, and forgotten histories, subscribe to Sleepy Factory, and let your curiosity find a place to rest. Each day, a new story waits for you here. Something gentle, something true, something to carry you softly into sleep. Until then, may your thoughts be quiet, your dreams kind, and your heart untroubled. Good night.